Welcome to the Rings of Power podcast, where the Lorehounds, your guides to the wonderful world of Middle-earth. I'm David.
I'm John.
And I'm Marilyn. This is our coverage for Prime Video's original series, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 2, Episode 2.
We're going to start off with our hot takes for the episode before we get into a scene-by-scene breakdown.
If you'd like to contact us, send emails to lotr@thelorehounds.com. If you want to join our Discord server or support the community by subscribing on either Supercast or Patreon, you can find all those links in the link tree in the show notes below.
And if you're not into recurring subscriptions, you can find a link to our season pass, which is a great way to support the podcast, but not have an ongoing subscription. It's $10 flat. You get access to the One Guide to Rule Them All, which is our Notion-based show guide, which has been curated very carefully by John and Marilyn, that has show information that won't spoil you on the wider, bigger story. And it's going to have all of our episode breakdowns and screenshots and all that kind of stuff, as well as you get ad-free episodes of all of these podcasts and the weekly bonus Lorecast, which is where Marilyn, John, and I will take a topic that we find relevant in the episodes, and then we go deep about 30 minutes or so on those to really flesh out the lore of the world a little bit. Let's get right into the podcast because we just recorded our episode 1. This is our episode 2. We're going to do 3 tomorrow night. We're doing these sort of 3 in a row. Mm-hmm. We have been fortunate enough to be gifted a gift from Jeff, the giver of gifts, gave us screeners, and we're very lucky and we're very grateful for those. We're going to be very careful about not spoiling episode to episode, even though we're watching ahead. Mm-hmm. But I think we're pretty good about carving out our little bubbles for each of the episodes.
Yeah. And we will only be able to watch ahead through episode 3 because I think after that it will be weekly screeners. So we're not going to watch ahead after this triple drop. It's just the way scheduling is. There's no way to do it without doing that.
Fortunately, and that's a big boon for us to have these. A real quick refresher, because we talked a lot about this on episode 1. So any questions about this kind of setup stuff or in our coverage stuff, I refer you back to episode 1. I'm a general casual fan. John is sort of a super fan. He's read lots, and of course, Marilyn is a academic level and has taught and studied and researched Tolkien. So I think we've got a good spectrum of folks to talk about the show. And I think for our Lorecast, we are going to be talking about the Maiar.
Mm-hmm. We're going to do sort of a breakdown of power levels.
Right. All from Arugula. Sorry.
Eru Iluvatar is the real name. Let's not confuse the masses now.
From the top down, right, through the supernatural beings.
Yep. And I think we'll talk about sort of the relative levels of the mortals too.
Okay.
Children of Iluvatar.
Perfect.
But yeah, so I've actually placed a really handy visual chart, flow chart in the show guide.
Nice.
So if you're a subscriber, you can access that. And everyone who will listen to the Lorecast is a subscriber, so I guess we don't have to worry about that.
There we go. And it's color-coded, folks, so.
It sure is.
Always over the colors. So let's jump into our hot takes for episode 2. Marilyn, why don't you lead us off? What did you think of this episode?
Again, just terrific. I thought it was interesting. The first episode made me think of Paradise Lost with the whole origin story of Lucifer turned Satan. Mm-hmm. Now we have the age-old tale of Mephistopheles and Faust.
Okay.
Where Faust is the one who sought knowledge and plumbed the depths of his learning and grew old, and death is approaching, and now he's feeling all the things that he's missed out in life and saying, oh, if only I could just have my youth back. Oh, what would I give to have my youth back? And poof, there comes Mephistopheles and says, well, give me your soul and I'll give you your youth back and more besides. So it's this definite notion of...
it pays to have an academic on our crew here. That's a great poll. That is a really great poll.
Yeah. It's a very famous, and I don't know how much Tolkien was thinking of it when he created this whole thing, but it's a type of tale that's been told for a very long time.
Right.
And the means of achieving it, the manipulation that happens is just stunning. And the way they show these things, particularly in this second season, quite extraordinary. I will pat myself a little on the back to say that I was satisfied to see the Rune plotline developing as I anticipated.
Excellent. Good job.
We'll say more about that later.
Internet points to you.
Internet points to me, yes.
Yeah, I'm pointing at the screen like Leo.
Delighted to see the dwarves plotline starting up now. Just wonderful to be back in Khazad-dûm and with Durin and Disa. And still they're working on this theme of trust. Who are you going to believe?
Who are you going to call?
Who are you going to call? Don't call Saul. He's not going to help in this case. So I found that, I wonder if that's going to be throughout. I can easily see where it would be throughout the whole season 2. So we shall see.
Great.
Yeah.
What about
John?
you, Dave?
Kick it over to John.
Yeah.
All right. I think this is great. I mean, this is exactly what I wanted out of when we did the Second Age podcast. We talked about Anatar. I love the way they pronounce it on the show.
Yeah.
And we talked about how it was going to be a whole, how does Sauron get in your head? And who is Sauron? How do we recognize him? And how does he play to the vulnerabilities within you, right? I mean, we see even in the Lord of the Rings, right? When Sam puts on the ring, he sees himself with a great garden, right? Like Sauron is very tailored to you. He will tailor his temptations to you. And I think that's really fascinating. And that's really characteristic of him as a villain. And so seeing him really play his cards with different characters, with Adar, and then with Celebrimbor, it's really fascinating to see him change, right? He's no longer the Lost King of the Southlands. Now he is the Lord of Gifts, right? And now he's elvish. And I love how he's so tailor-made to Celebrimbor that he might not appeal as well to other characters, right? Other characters might be suspicious. So it's really exactly what I wanted from this season. I also, in the middle of this episode, I thought, I see why they did a multiple episode drop. As much as I wish that we had a weekly release all the time, they really are touching on different zones of the world, of this massive world in each episode. Yeah. And so I see why they did what they did. They wanted to give us a taste of everybody by the end of these 3.
Yeah, we still haven't seen anything from Numenor, so stay tuned, folks.
Right. Well, anyway, I'm very thrilled. David?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That they're trying to pick up the energy from the long delay between, and so hitting all 3 and making sure they get full coverage of all of the different plot lines. I think you're right. I think that's as we were complaining about the 3 episode drop, which is a lot of work for us podcasters, and I think a lot of work for viewers too. Like, oh my God, I gotta. Right. And then people get out of sync because, I haven't watched 2 yet and I haven't watched 3 yet. And I think that's bad for a water cooler conversation in terms of coalescing people. But at the same time, I get from a story standpoint why they might want to do that a little bit. And who knows what else?
Come on. The extended versions are like 4 hours of the Peter Jackson movies, right? Like you can sit down for a little bit.
Hello.
And I don't wonder what other programming Amazon has after this. What's coming right up? NFL, because I think they have NFL. So anyway, let's not try to read the tea leaves at Amazon. My overall take, again, like on first viewing, I was like, I'm not sure. And like I said on episode 1, is it a me thing or is it a show thing? But doing the breakdown today, there were at least 2 big scenes. There was one with Galadriel and Elrond, and then Elrond with Círdan.
Yeah.
And these really deep conversations. And then, of course, Trixie Sauron doing all of his kinds of stuff. So even if at some sort of surface level for me, the show, like I'm having a hard time getting into it, if I can sort of get beyond the veil of whatever this is and then actually get into what they're doing with the show, wow, like there's some cool stuff here and there's lots of amazing lore things. And I know just enough to go, oh, they said this word or they mentioned that place. And I'm like, oh, what's that about? I get to talk to my friends on the podcast about like, what does that mean? And how is that working? And all of that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of existing in a dual world yet, and we'll see the rest of the season, but I'm definitely underneath, that's a structure I'm really liking what they're doing. And yeah, it does feel, maybe it's just because these first couple of episodes, it's a huge amount of setup.
Yeah.
They're winding up the clockworks for this season. And I think the danger is if they spend too much time winding and not actually, getting through the resolution of the tension that they're setting up, so we'll see how well they've paced the season out by the end of the season. Mm-hmm. One thing I did like from a technical standpoint, from a sort of a lore, like a generalist lore standpoint, they did it was with the Annatar name. They're very good at telling us how to say the names without making it like they're teaching us, but yet they are schooling us with all of these names and these places, and that is really great because, as we saw with season 1 and the mixed results of the season in terms of its, how well it did overall, one thing we know that it did was it brought in a huge wave of new readers.
Yes, absolutely.
And so this whole new crop of readers, and I think even old readers like me, if I go back and I reread Lord of the Rings, or get into the Silmarillion a little bit more, what's going to be in my head? This show, because I'm going to hear Khazad-dûm pronounced that way, and and Annatar pronounced that way. So they're really doing a good job in terms of enculturating us into the world, into these pronunciations and things like that. So.
And Galadriel.
All right. We don't need to rehash our old beefs.
Let's also say that I thought that how they did the summary of season 1 in the very first episode was very well done.
Oh, I skipped that so fast.
Hey,
previously on?
I'm watching for the listeners, John.
Yes, okay. Yes.
Well, I'm glad someone is. I'm watching for myself.
Of course you are.
We should say before we get into the scene by scene. Well, I think John and I talked about this on before we got on the microphones a little bit about the opening, and I think we're going to talk about the opening credits maybe a little bit later. We'll watch them and see if there's anything interesting. I don't think we need to spend any time on this episode other than to say that it's a riff on season 1, and I don't know yet how significantly different or important. There are definite differences because this is a different opening.
Yes.
But I don't know if there's any really thing of importance or significance yet. So we're going to pause on that for a moment, and if there's important stuff in there, we'll bring it back around.
Yeah, we'll do that in episode 4 so that we spread it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you notice anything that was important that you thought?
Well, the first thing to notice was that it's a red gold sand this time.
Okay.
And wondering what that means.
Okay.
Well, didn't the showrunners come out before the season and say this season's all about the villains?
They did.
I didn't see that, but
we didn't have all of the black snaky bits coming through so much.
And it's still using the cymatics, the modal vibrations.
Right.
There's a great Wikipedia article on this, CYMATICS. And it talks all about these sort of sand tables and sound wave vibrations and stuff like that. So, which I think is a great, we thought it was great in season 1 because it all goes back to the music.
Right.
That Eru was, the symphonies that he was conducting.
Sound creating form.
Yeah, exactly.
And John, I know you were a little sad about this, but I'm so glad that they're using the Howard Shore music for this because it it embedded itself in my heart and soul.
It's growing on me. It's growing on me, the theme.
Well,
I still much prefer Bear's themes within the show.
Oh, sure. But
I may be a little biased since he's come on the pod.
No. Bias away, Everybody has their own style of music and their own appreciation. But no, I thought it was a lovely acknowledgement and the passing of the torch. And and plus just the familiarity of the opening music helps bring many of us back into the world again. So
fair enough.
Right.
So our scene by scene guide, John writes a synopsis of the episode, and that's going to be all available in the show guide, in the one guide, and then we use that as our episode breakdown. So you can refer back to what we're reading off of if you're a subscriber.
Right.
But John, do you want to take it away?
Yeah. And don't forget, you can click into the names of the characters and the locations, and it'll bring you to places. It's exciting.
It's very cool.
Back to the dwarves is the first scene. The pit of Mount Doom smolders as we pan over a map to Casa Doom. There we see an array of mirrors bringing lights into the cave. Durin the Third and Disa tighten their purse string. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Durin the Fourth. Durin the Fourth and Disa tighten their purse strings now that Durin has been demoted, and Disa reaffirms her love for him. As she tries to convince Durin to speak to his father, she senses an incoming disturbance that collapses the bridge and blocks the light from entering the kingdom.
Marilyn, what did you think of the dwarven technology down here in Casa Doom?
Well, this has been one of the most magnificent creations of the series, I think. So many people are just thrilled to be seeing Casa Doom in all its glory. My first thought was, are we losing it so soon?
I don't think so.
No, I wanted another whole season of Casa Doom in all its glory. So how they're going to repair this, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a little dwarvish Anatar coming along to do something along those lines. But no, I was really sad to see the massive mirrors at the very top of the beautiful sculpture on the eastern gate be destroyed, and watch how one by one the reflectors lost the light. And I mean, it was very well done. It was very well done. And finally, we know why that rock was falling on that particular bridge. So good, we're done with that.
Right. It's not
no more discussion about why, when, and how, and all that. Yeah, it was not the Balrog. Even though it could remind you of it.
Well, I was going to say that scene is very thematically related to the movie scene.
Of course,
right. You know, they're very good at using the visual language of Jackson's movies.
And I'm pleased to say that they seem to be now limiting themselves to just that. I have yet to have a Jacksonian moment that throws me out of the story.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I'm with you on that. I've never felt like I got bounced because, they're just ripping Jackson.
No, but they are drawing upon Tolkien's language itself. Right. It's so the song that Gil-galad sang in the last episode. Clearly, even same phrases that Galadriel sang. I think I mentioned that already, so apologies for repeating myself. I loved the visual of the map of Mordor with Mount Doom exploding and the tentacles reaching out through the map.
Yeah, that was cool.
And I wondered, is this supposed to represent, plate tectonics, or is it the Sauron energy?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you could say the answer is yes.
Right, to both.
But it seems now that Sauron equals tentacles. We're going to see another scene with this same image. Tentacles, roots, things reaching out and digging in.
Right. The more we see of Casa Doom, the more I think... So we know that the Balrog in the writings of Tolkien doesn't really show up until the Third Age. Right. And so people were saying, well, are they breaking lore here by having him show up in the Second Age? The more I watch this, the more I think either the Balrog was just a tease last season of the Third Age things that are going to happen, and they're not actually going to have a whole bit with it. Or I think they're going to have the Balrog be dealt with this show and then goes dormant again, and then they'll come back in the canonical time.
Look, sometimes some creatures we just take a long time to wake up in the morning, and
that's true.
Got to have some coffee.
2,000 years.
They didn't give him his coffee.
Think about it for a minute, and
Yeah.
However, I will say there was something in one of the trailers that leads me to believe that there is going to, two things lead me to believe there's going to be more active Balrog
fighting
in this season.
Okay.
But I won't spoil any of them for those of you who have deliberately not watched teasers and trailers.
And it's hard to know how much they got out over their skis a little bit in episode 1. Some people might criticize them for doing some weird stuff. And then as we know, they did really...
Season 1, you mean?
Season one. And, how much have they pulled back? So things that they might have opened up in season 1, they might go, let's be a little bit more demure about that. And,
all right. Very mindful.
It's very they are. I think they're being very mindful about it. Very cutesy.
All right. So what did you think, David, of this scene?
I liked being back with the dwarves. I like our characters. The one thing that I felt a little bit, and it's fine. It was very gender normative, though. It was very much like Durin's the man and Disa's the woman. And then their whole conversation about their relationship and what's going on. And of course, they introduce the fact that, okay, he's not a prince anymore, so he doesn't get to live off the state. They've got to, make their own ways, which we see later on in the episode. But this is a very, very human conversation. These are very human interactions. They're not dwarven interactions. We don't know what dwarvens would be like but we're all writing and creating from a human-centered, so any aliens that we see oftentimes in science fiction and fantasy are just echoes of humanity, right? Because how do you get out of your own mindset? It's nearly impossible. So it's fine, you can lean one way or another, but I just felt that they leaned in a very human direction, and this felt very normative in terms of cisgendered beings, arguing over household domestic finances and relationship stuff.
Interesting.
I'm not knocking it, but I'm just saying it just seemed to me like, we'll do something with dwarves a little bit, right? Tell me a dwarven story, not necessarily a human story. I think that's my point.
Uh-huh.
Does that make sense?
I think Tolkien always explicitly wrote in a very shades of humanity.
Sure.
Yes. Right? Like I don't think he wanted them to seem alien. I think he wanted them to feel like a different kind of human.
They're all children of Ilúvatar.
Okay.
Whether by choice or by adoption.
Okay.
Yeah.
As it says in that chapter in Silmarillion. So
right.
I don't know. There just wasn't enough dwarven spices on
No, I get it. I see what you're saying. It didn't trouble me in the least.
Okay.
But,
You want to make Disa more beardy? Is that the problem?
No. Oh, I'm glad. I actually... Wait, don't box me into a corner here, man. You're going to get me in trouble.
No.
No, I like I said, I like the characters. I like the actors. I like the portrayals. I just, the writing, the dynamic of the writing was just very I recognize that conversation.
Sure.
And it didn't show me anything new about dwarves. What I learned about dwarves was their amazing technology, which we knew about with the mirrors system. And then we get to see a marketplace and what daily life is like for dwarves. That was all great, right? That's bringing me into the world. And that's something they showed something new and interesting with the mirrors, and they made that a plot point. And I just thought the relationship was very mundane.
We're also going to see a little later of dwarven culture that if you are an expert in whatever craft it is, you can stand in front of the king and say, actually, no, we can't do this. And it doesn't matter if you're Narvi or if you're Disa. Your knowledge is accepted and respected.
Cool.
Right.
So
let's go back to the elves. Galadriel's vision is next. Galadriel pays respects to her brother when Celebrimbor arrives in the forest, speaking of an unexpected visitor as the forest darkens. The vines ensnare Celebrimbor, who recites a poem of the rings in the Black Speech. Galadriel reawakens in a council meeting with Gil-galad, asking her advice to deal with Sauron. She agrees with the council that they should invade Mordor / the Southlands. Gil-galad intuits that she has had a vision, and she confesses that she still worries Sauron will turn to crafting more rings for domination with Celebrimbor. Gil-galad insists Celebrimbor's knowledge is safe, but Galadriel sees Halbrand outside Eregion and continues to press Gil-galad and request to go there. Gil-galad worries about Sauron's influence over Galadriel and forbids her from facing him alone, but Galadriel has another plan. So long scene, but why don't you start, David? You haven't started yet.
One thing I hope they don't do, and it's fine to use them, using flashbacks and dreams. I just want them to be careful about it. And at first I was a little confused that I was like, what was this dream? And then suddenly it's a waking dream. It's like, oh, okay, so we got Muad'Dib here, right, having a waking dream because she's wearing the rings.
But also that's something he says later. It's enhanced your power of foresight, right? So this is something inherent to Galadriel.
Exactly.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's a good point.
Yes.
And think of the mirror of Galadriel, right? From Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of that foresight going on with that character.
And one of the things I do love about all of that we're seeing here is that it really makes everything that happens in Lord of the Rings I'm even more amped for like rewatching or re-engaging with that material to really understand. I'm like, oh, like I get it now. I get why, this is all going down. So it's very
nice.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
I liked this whole idea that the seeds that she's planted are the things that are, causing problems. And of course we see Celebrimbor here getting crucified. And I thought of you, Marilyn. I was like, "Well, he's on a tree and he's bleeding and he's got things." I was like, "This is a crucifixion," and so I really liked the visual imagery that they were using here. What the how evocative it was.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty rough.
Well, they are foreshadowing potentially the very gruesome end, spoilers, that Celebrimbor will have, that anybody who has read the books will know only too well.
Okay,
and I thought it was really quite brilliant how they did that.
So hold on to this image for future episodes.
Absolutely hold on to this image.
Okay.
I loved that it started with another seed planting for Memoriam, tying us back to Evrondir and to Adar. They were planting the seeds, life and defiance of death right before battle.
Right.
Here,
I forgot about that.
Galadriel is planting seeds for Memoriam, and supposedly to beautify, enhance this memorial to her brother, and then it all turns horrible. I was really glad they gave this to us so early on, because we saw most of this image in the trailers and whatnot, and I thought, what are they doing?
yeah, you could do anything in a vision, right?
right.
But this makes sense super. Even. Yeah.
And there was even this sort of suggestion that we see Sauron sculpting Celebrimbor.
Yeah, and
himself is supposed to be
being lost in Sauron's will, right?
Yes, all those creepy vines again, the tentacle thing going toward him and just overwhelming him.
Right.
So I thought it was very, very powerful, very well done. And then to find out that this is her possible future vision, or a symbolic warning, maybe, if you will.
Yeah.
So no wonder she's so concerned about Celebrimbor. She would have been just anyway, but now, these things keep coming to her. So she knows that there's something that needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
And I like that it's building the ring mythology, that the rings are doing stuff to people. Right? You put this on and you get an instant reaction and the tree comes to life, right? They're powerful, but then they're affecting the wearer as well. And we know that from the Jackson movies and obviously the books, where, whenever Frodo puts on the ring, or Bilbo talks about it, they talk about the effects of what the ring does to their physiology.
Which could be a little uncomfortable for people who want to hew close to the lore, because there was never a sense that the elven rings had that kind of
interesting
impact.
Well, but there was a sense that had Sauron been able to use the One Ring, he would have been able to dominate.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There was a back door.
Yeah.
In the elven rings. And maybe you could argue, well, it's because thousands of years have passed and they have grown into the ring and matured and know how they can use it. And, plus Sauron was, again, spoiler alert, but if you know Lord of the Rings, you know that Sauron was kind of in deep freeze at this time. And so the rings were freed from his influence as much as they could be, and they had more time to learn. But I have felt ambiguous about this from the beginning. When she first picks up her ring and puts it on, the sort of looks that they're having her give, and of course Elrond's perpetual
scowl,
insistence. Right? Yeah, he's looking really unhappy.
His resting elf face.
Well, not exactly resting though, is it? That's the problem.
I like it because when you look at the One Ring and the different effects that it has on people, these rings really are about enhancing what is already present, right?
That's correct.
It's not about adding a new power. It's about enhancing what's already there. It's about making Sam think he can have a giant garden. It's about letting Bilbo and Frodo, who are already great at hiding because they're hobbits, hide a little better, right? And so I think that it's completely reasonable to have Galadriel have enhanced foresight, to have the elves who have the light of the trees of Valinor within them be able to bring that light into the trees of Lindon.
And there are some scenes, I can't remember exactly where it happens. One in particular, actually, it's shortly after something happens in this episode, but further down, between Celebrimbor and Halbrand, that we see Gil-galad looking down at his ring as if something has drawn his attention to it. And then he shifts his hands and covers the ring with his other hand. It's a subtle thing, but it's there. And so I'm just wondering how many messages are they sending out to us that I'm missing?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, we also have this whole idea that Galadriel is not quite over her ex, right? And that's going to come up a couple times through this episode is, hey, Sauron didn't leave you. You are still under the influence of Sauron. And
she knows it.
Yeah. And I like that we're seeing this transformation where she's been really cocky this whole time, right? And I think she was humbled at the end of last season by the way she was deceived. And she's starting to be like, all right, let me slow down a minute. Which is good.
Yes, and not make assumptions about, how am I doing here? Of course, we don't want it to go in the other direction where she doesn't trust herself at all. Again, trust. I mean, this really is, to my mind, it just keeps coming up again and again.
I was thinking about something David said, which was, David, you said, we're going into Galadriel's master of deduction thing.
Yes, I got in my notes here, CSI Linden.
But the problem is, if you're a master at deduction and you're always looking for clues, somebody can feed you clues and lead you down the path that they want.
Yeah.
So it cuts both ways.
Yep.
Anyway, you were going to say something, David?
Yeah, well, I was actually going to bring up the CSI Linden thing and Galadriel's enhanced powers. But then just going back to that conversation, that sort of with the king with his, little council meeting there. Besides like some of the more background maps there, that was interesting. One thing that I really liked, this may be more of a superficial thing, is Galadriel as a general of the northern armies doesn't look like a general in our sense of a Western, big shoulder boards and a hat and lots of medals and stuff. She's wearing what Galadriel wears. And she's a general. And I'm like, I'm down for that. I really appreciated the fact that they address her as general and, she's accorded those, that privilege and rank, but then, hey, we don't need to have all of, we don't need
She's not in camo.
Yeah, she's not in camo and doing the hardcore salute stuff. And so I just really appreciated the fact that the showrunners didn't bend to those sort of stereotypes.
And we have another woman who is commander of another region. I think it was the South, but I'm not sure that's true.
Okay.
And I'm also starting to notice more women in the ranks of the soldiery.
Yes, I noticed that too. So
it's good stuff.
Absolutely.
Eregion is protected, 10-foot thick walls. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing here. Come on.
Yeah.
It was like, burr, 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 like shine a big light. Oh, and doesn't take an eye, an eye of an eagle to know. It's like, we know where eagles are coming. So they're having some fun with the writing here, I think.
Yeah. Shall we move on to Halbrand?
Sure.
A messenger asks Sauron Halbrand to leave Eregion, but he refuses. Celebrimbor insists on leaving him be, even though he's injured. He says there will be a messenger from Linden any day, but the scene cuts to the bodies of the messengers and the crushed message. So sad.
Dun, dun, dun.
Not a lot here. This is really all set up.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I do have questions. This was one that may kind of slide a little bit towards Jazz Handy. Because who took out the messengers?
Ooh, yes. I do have a note about that. If messengers arriving. Who is that? Sauron or Adar?
Right. If it was Sauron, how did he know about them? And who did he have do it? Who does he have in his control right now that he can tell, okay, go do that? I never thought it might be Adar.
But why would it be Adar? Because why would he be trying to intercept messages between...
Yeah. And he's also all the way to the east. It's not going to work.
Yeah. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. But I don't think it was random robbers either, because if it was, then they wouldn't have killed the horses.
they made it seem very gruesome with the chains and them dragging away. Code's very orc, right?
Sure, but
We prefer Uruk.
Uruk, sorry.
And which Uruks have decided that they're going to take orders from Sauron?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very good question. It's a little bit of a mystery.
I wonder if they're going to, resolve it someday, or if they just said, all right, it's enough that you guys know that the message never got there because the messengers got killed.
But then there's another little subtle thing, which is the way Sauron turns his back to show off his injuries.
Oh, yeah.
Right. He's being very tricksy.
Yeah. All part of the deception.
Right. But in every interaction with Halbrand, Sauron, whatever, there's always some very subtle manipulation, some little, when he's talking to the Southlander, there's all these little manipulations and little sort of drawing out and little coy phrases, and he knows how to reach into somebody and pluck their strings.
And I think he probably called down the thunderstorm just in time to get soaking wet.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And play on Celebrimbor's guilt still further.
Really good point.
He does a lot of weather working in this episode.
He's, I was thinking of Sauron almost like calling back to the previous scene. Once he's infected you, it's like a bee sting. The more that you have interaction with him, the more times you get stung, the worse and worse your reactions get over time.
Interesting.
It just sort of, the way that once he's got a hold on you, you can't ever get it out. Or maybe it's like a jellyfish sting. You can never get the thing out, right? It's going to be in there for a long time.
I mean, it's the way all cults work, right? Is they prey on the vulnerable. They prey on people looking for answers.
Mm-hmm.
And they give them to them.
Well, and they also prey upon being able to determine your particular characteristics and your weak points.
Yeah.
And then exploit. I mean, the whole thing from last season, find out what they fear most and tell them how they can overcome it.
Right.
But who doesn't have fears? Who doesn't have self-doubts? Who doesn't have regrets? And, I wish I had, or if only I had, turned left instead of right, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think that's the point, right? Is that's why nobody could have destroyed the ring. It had to be an accident.
Yeah. Yes.
That's really interesting.
Tolkien made that clear in his letters and in various other places. Actually, in one of the earliest manuscripts versions of Lord of the Rings, he has Frodo, who has then got a different name, Bingo, say...
Thank God he didn't do bingo. Sorry. Just go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He had him say, I will take the ring, although I am not sure I can destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
So that idea was in Tolkien's mind very early on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of cults, let's move on.
Yes.
Good segue.
Magic cult here. In Rune, a masked rider travels towards magic cult headquarters. There, an acolyte delivers moths that reform as the Dweller. A mysterious wizard-like figure learns of Sauron's presence in Middle-earth and scolds the Dweller for failing to capture the stranger. The tracker arrives to offer his services, capturing the Istar.
Mm-hmm.
I was just watching this whole scene. I'm just like, okay, Marilyn, like, what do you got here? Let's talk. There are things to talk about. I mean, is it Ciarán Hinds, the actor?
Ciarán
Hinds. That's what it is. I couldn't remember what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Great to see him again. So cool. And I think, John, you said that you thought he might be a blue wizard.
Oh, he's blue.
Okay.
Yes.
He's blue. If he's not blue, I'll be shocked.
Yeah, me too. And it also, to my mind, reinforces my case that the stranger is also a blue.
So how many blues were there?
Just two.
Okay. So this could work out really nicely.
I am more encouraged, even with knowing already that Corey Olsen is on my side. I really very encouraged by this whole thing. Yeah, I love that we have the Runic Horseman music is Irish desert with Bedouin drumming. It's a real nice lick, very energetic, and they use it for the end credits with women's chorus that sounds a lot like Bulgarian singing. So I mean, There is really going for the multi-ethnic mix here. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, we have the blood ritual to re-embody the
literal blood magic. Literal
blood magic. And, that is a clear sign of Goetia, this manipulative, dominating form of magic. And I like that we now have a name for them, the White Wings. Mm-hmm. When he's saying, was it worth expending the blood for you White Wings to reconstitute, given all your failures?
We only see one reconstituted as well.
Yes,
even
isn't
though
that interesting?
3 jars were brought in. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure 3 jars were brought in, but we only see the one being opened.
But the other thing is, this is the first time we've heard that one speak.
Okay.
For all of season 1, the Dweller never said a word.
Huh.
And now the Dweller is being called upon to presumably report for all 3 of them.
Interesting.
So yeah, I was very interested in that.
I think they couldn't afford the casting, but that's okay.
Well, or they, a lot of the moths got eaten on the way. Who knows? I was interested that the staff that the wizard is carrying has a headpiece that looks very much like a flattened version of a Nile goddess statue. Mm. So again, we're going to desert community.
Okay.
Desert climb. It's a classic pose with, the arms over the head kind of thing.
With a big gem in the middle of it.
Right. So obviously they're not doing a one-to-one correspondence here. And there's nothing feminine looking about this particular form. Mm-hmm. But the raised arms curved over the head very much said, you can Google Nile goddess statue and you'll come up with images of what I'm talking about here. And I found it interesting that the men agreed to work for the evil wizard so that he will heal the people's skin disease. And I'm wondering if they're signaling leprosy here. Mm-hmm. Mm. Because again, according to some historical interpretations, it was the Crusaders who went to the east who brought back leprosy to Western Europe. Now, I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's been one of the stories that has been spread. So they're using lots of different contemporary cultural images to reinforce this notion of the desert community without using any one particular desert culture. Mm-hmm. So I find all of that interesting.
It's got to be hot under those masks.
Yeah, but you save a lot on sunscreen.
Yeah, you do. But you're right. The masks don't I didn't recognize those. No. Those seemed very wholly, quote unquote original.
Quite original. And if that was John Howe, my goodness, he's just continuing to come forth with new and wonderful ideas. It's great.
I just Googled for a Nile goddess statue. Uh-huh. And yeah, boom. The curved raised, it's like right there. It's so clear. Mm-hmm. Whereas
the previous season, we saw the staff, and what was on top looked very much like Isis, the typical thing associated with Isis. So we seem to be going with these Egyptian deities.
What can we safely talk about in terms of staff lore? Like this staff with this, these raised arms, or the gem, the stranger is constantly looking for this power-up staff that he sees in his dream, and he thinks he gets one in this episode, but it doesn't last, it doesn't work. And obviously we have, in the I'm just going to reference the movies, with Saruman and Gandalf, and using their staffs. What can we safely talk about staff lore?
Well, it was the Egyptian magical tradition that first gave us staffs, as far as I know. Okay. If you think about the story of Moses and how he was contesting with the Egyptian magicians, and they would, have their staffs and they throw them on the ground and they turn into snakes, and then they pick them up and they turn back to staff.
Okay.
And Moses doing similar kind of magic, and his overpowered the others because his source was Yahweh. And that idea of a magician needing a staff kind of got transferred into the major text, the Hermistes Trismegistus. I probably didn't say that correctly. It's basically a manual of magic that came from the Egyptian version of the Greek and Roman Hermes, Mercury god. And it was all about magic. Thoth was the name of the Egyptian god. And so it was the Book of Thoth was another name for it. And it just had, these systems, spells and gestures, and here's how you do stuff and so forth. And that got transferred into Western Europe through alchemy. Because alchemy was a system of magic which got really popular in many different places throughout Europe and the Middle East. They attempt to change lead into gold.
Right.
And so as a process of that, you have these other concepts and systems coming in with this Book of Thoth. And so you eventually, things like wizards have to have staffs, or at least wands, become embedded in Western notions of, okay, so how do I know if it's a magic user or not?
Right. And obviously wands have now been even more enculturated following the Harry Potter material. Yeah, I just have going back to the ancient Egyptian and Hebrew history. I just have Charlton Heston with his staff,
right, exactly,
right, and that's burned in now to my my synapses.
For many people, it is supposed to be a tool through which you can channel your power, and we'll see that in a subsequent scene with this episode. And you also see how well the magician is able of controlling that power and channeling it. And so the staff is supposed to help you with that, according to some systems.
And then that's even, in terms of the spread of that idea, even all the way out into our role-playing games with Dungeons and Dragons, and having magic users oftentimes need a spell, a focus to channel their energies, or a thing to some sort of talisman or something.
And practicing Wiccans and pagans and so forth, many of them will use staffs, many of them use wands, many of them say it's not the tool, it's the mind that's important. You can use your finger as a wand if you need to direct energy somewhere. There's a whole range of beliefs about that. The Druids, of course, the Druid staff is an image that many people think of. Right. So it really was a very, very widespread image.
Tolkien's magic systems, then it's a focus for the Istari then to channel their energy.
Yes. Yeah, that seems to be how they use it.
Okay.
And, if you think of, Gandalf battling the Balrog, and his, almost his final act as Gandalf the Grey was to smote the bridge with his staff.
Right.
You wouldn't begrudge an old man his walking staff.
Exactly. Jackson makes good play of that, doesn't he?
And Saruman, I think, had a gem in his, like an opalescent sort of stone in his staff.
He did.
Gandalf, I don't think, did.
No, Gandalf's staff was a lovely
rooted
knot,
kind of
sort of a root knot.
Yeah.
Which, if you looked at it, could suggest the Elvish rune for G, which was a very clever design feature.
Also, Saruman is a Maya who was from the Vala Aule, the smithing Vala. Gandalf is from Manwë.
Good. And the
Look
fact
at you with your skills there, John.
I'm
impressed.
I'm here all night.
He's doing it. He's doing it.
Yeah, he's good.
Saruman's staff, as represented by Peter Jackson in a very clever way, was not a natural substance. It was iron, or looked like iron, and it had the pinnacles, think pinnacles, and what was within it. I'm not even sure it was a gemstone per se. It looked more like a smoky globe.
Right. I was thinking an opal. Some opalescent.
Yeah, I think my thought was some kind of glass, but
very smithy.
Also suggests, of course, the Palantir.
Yes, that too.
So,
all right. Any other thoughts on this scene?
Interesting design in the temple. I don't know where they made that up from, but that
very Middle Eastern.
Okay,
very Middle Eastern. Reminded me of bits of Crete and of Greece.
You get some heat management stuff, high ceilings,
absolutely.
That it all works in that kind of stuff. But I think you have a note here, which I also had a thought of. What was that growl at the end of the scene when he threatens the, or was that my note? Maybe that was my note. Yeah, that is my note. I just didn't bullet point it in the same way. There was a growl at the end when he threatens the dweller. and it sounded like the warg from episode 1.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. But no monster appears, and then that's right when a servant says, "Hey, the trackers are here."
Oh, okay. Interesting.
No, I missed that.
Yeah, and just to be clear for listeners, the blue wizards we're referencing are 2 other Istari. They are 2 other wizards of the same class of Maiar, which we'll get into in our lore cast, of the same class of Maiar as the stranger. And they kind of come to Middle-earth and then they just nope out. They just kind of disappear. And it's very vague in the writings of what happened to them. But one of the theories that Tolkien posited, because he would theorize about his own work as if he didn't write it, one of the theories that he posited was they went to Rune and at least one of them started magic cults.
Right.
And so here we are. We've got a magic cult. We've got a wizard-looking guy. If that's not a blue wizard, come on. What are we doing here?
Exactly.
Yeah, they're really wasting a lot of good lore if it's not a blue wizard.
Yeah, as well as an actor. And he talks very authoritatively, like, you're going to go up against an Istari, tracker dude?
Yeah.
No way. He's going to smoke you.
You're going to fight me?
Yeah.
You're going to fight somebody my age?
My power? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is interesting because at this point, Círdan, the blue wizard, has no notion of the stranger's ability. And the fact that he has enormous power, but he has yet to have control as well.
Right. And they know that, though.
Well, they learn it in a subsequent scene this episode, don't they?
But he says he says to the Dweller, we've got to find him before he figures out how to harness his power.
That's true. Yes.
So,
right.
So that means I think it's good. Another good pointer to the fact that he might have himself gone through that, so he knows what the stranger is going through.
Oh, good catch, David. Right. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Okay.
All right.
Moving on.
Let's take a quick break before we get back to the show. And we're back to talk about the stranger's name. Nori attempts to name the stranger, but he says, your name is who you are, not something given to you. Also, Ged said that too. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Poppy Proudfellow.
Big Earthy vibes all over this.
I'm Leo pointing at the screen again. Poppy Proudfellow attempts to find a shortcut, but the stranger worries about resource management because he is a D&D expert like David. The trackers almost find them before the group hides. When the tracker leaves, the trio finds a new trail. I'm all about humor tonight. Sorry,
yes.
Guys.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. Big time Earthsea vibes here. You'll feel your heart glow when.
Which is kind of funny. Is that Tolkien-esque? Because that's not something that's always stuck out to me in Tolkien, right? Is Gandalf himself has, if this is Gandalf, if the stranger is Gandalf, which we don't know yet, Gandalf himself is Mithrandir, is Gandalf, is Olorin, like has many names and still answers to them all and seems to welcome them all. I don't know if that feels very Tolkien-esque to me.
No, because Tolkien wanted to invent all of his own names himself.
Exactly. Everyone had like 5 names in Tolkien.
Yeah. At least. I mean, just consider that the elves themselves had, at least 2 major languages.
Right. You have a Sindarin name, you have a Quenya
Earth.
name. Yeah.
And in families, you were given a mother name, you were given a father name, maybe you got a third name when you found out who you really were. But maybe that's the thing that they were pointing back to.
Get Ursula Le Guin out of the writing staff. I mean, come on. Come on here.
What do you guys make of the fact that Nuri seems to forget that she said Doderic earlier because, she said, she suggests the name, they're talking, all the stuff happens. And at the end, she says, what about Doderic? And they say, well, you already suggested that. She goes, I did. And she seems to be afflicted with some sort of memory thing. And
I just took it as like, she's going through the list and she repeated one already because she's just keeping going through the list of Harfoots.
But they dedicated several lines to
Yeah.
that, and it made a point in it. And you don't need to. They're already showing us that they're suffering from heat exhaustion in other ways. So it didn't make sense to me. It seems to me like that might be an opening for something else going on with Nori.
I thought it was a response to, I can't remember what it was they had just realized or discovered, but she and Poppy were looking ahead on the trail, possibly, or
you're cutting across,
making a decision about something. And I think maybe that was distracting Nori because she was, considering the deeper implications of, do we really know which is the best way to go?
Right. And now they're going to have to go the way that they think it's going to be harder to avoid the baddies. So,
right.
Harfoot hiding skills are well practiced.
Wasn't that great how they showed them doing their thing and the stranger is bundling things up and looks around and they're gone.
They're gone, yeah.
This was actually, now I'm going to be the one pushing back. This was actually the one Peter Jackson-esque reference that I didn't like. I was like, all right, you're just doing the Nazgul with the...
Yeah. I got that
leaning over. I'm like, fine.
Yeah.
Fine.
I totally got that.
Sorry, I'm not getting it.
Like when the Shire 4 are hiding under...
Oh, okay. I'm with you now.
Under the little cliff.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
And all the bugs and centipedes and stuff start to crawl out.
Right. So instead of roots, we have the webbed cover that they use.
Yeah, and then we have the snake menacing them. So it didn't take me out, John, but I totally could see it. I don't disagree with you in terms of...
Yeah, that was the one that stuck out to me. Like, all right, too much.
Well, clearly it didn't take me out, so... I was too busy focusing on other things, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I guess later on we'll see how that resource management goes. But for now, let's go to more resource management, the Dwarven food shortage. The dwarves of Khazad-dûm worry about their withering crops with a lack of sunlight. Disa brings her stone singers to Doran 3 to find a path to dig new sun shafts. However, they fail to do so. We also meet Narvi, a close confidant of Doran III, and Doran tries to ask about his son, but Disa turns it around on him.
Yeah. That's called triangulation, sire. I refuse to participate in it.
This was the one scene that was, for me, there's a little bit too much exposition in this. The Disa talking with her two other stone singers. And then yes, sire, a volcano. This was just a big exposition dump and sort of syncing up the gears a little bit. Then the whole, again, just the same vibe that I had before. And I don't mean to be a downer, but the whole family dynamic thing with the proud, whatever, it just felt very human to me and not dwarven. But again, that might be a me thing. So anyway,
I felt it more dwarven because we were seeing how dwarves functioned together. We were hearing about dwarven approaches to things like engineering and digging and management and so forth.
Right. I suppose that was there. I probably was paying attention to the other stuff and not that. So,
but also seeing how this particular dwarven king interacts with
his subjects,
and in particular with someone like Disa, who I think has his respect for her skills. Maybe even before, oh yes, you're also my son's wife. And so that's nice to see the if you're talking about gender equality here, that our best stone singers tell us, well, that's huge.
Right.
Think of all the stone metaphors that the Dwarven language contains. If these are your best stone singers, that means something.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, he was looking very kingly there too. That was some good visuals in that. But the fact that, hey, you're the expert stone singer and you want to do this thing, cool, do that thing because you are the top stone singer. So I'm just the king. What do I know about stone singing? You know about stone singing. Do the stone singing.
And then he comes off of his throne and he gets down to Disa's level, and that's when he starts talking about
family
relationship stuff and the family stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
He's taking off his king hat.
And
also known as crown.
His grandpa hat.
Can I just say, when Disa says we can't hear the mountain anymore, that was terrifying.
Mm.
And you have to wonder if that's something
terrifying.
Put there by a certain Maiar.
Well, that's the thing, John. Throughout this whole episode, every time something goes wrong, you're beginning to wonder, was it Sauron? I mean, you're seeing Sauron in your own shadow.
Mm-hmm.
I just hope they don't overdo that.
Mm.
Well, but I think it's good that they're not making it explicit, right? That it is ambiguous.
Of course. Yes. But let us keep our minds clear and recognize that there are other forces in the world besides Sauron. And sometimes, an earthquake is just an earthquake.
Right.
But later in the episode, the way that the whole thing with they can't hear the mountain, the way that it's reading for me is that so the king disowns his son, the prince. That's a schism within dwarf society. And that schism is having effects on beyond. And then you throw in an active volcano and they're all out of whack. Like the whole dwarven balance is destabilized.
I like that.
And the fact that they can't hear the mountain singing has to do with the fact that the king and his son are having a schism. And if you could heal that, then maybe they could hear the mountain again.
Wow, I really like that.
Yeah.
Really?
That's
really?
a great theory. I'm liking it.
Okay. It seemed pretty obvious to me, so I don't know. I was just like, God, this seems like a simplistic plot, but if you guys think it's good.
Why we have 3
That's
That's
true. Fair enough.
All right. Well, we have a little bit more dwarven stuff to get through. Sorry, David. And I call it Everyman Doran 4. Doran 4 just tries to go to work, but is bullied by his coworkers. Arriving home, Disa tries to impress the seriousness of the situation upon him. I just feel badly for the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast recently about royals, particularly queens of history, Catherine the Great, talking about Marie Antoinette, and they were talking about how nobody is actually built to be a royal. And it's a job that you're born into and you can't get out of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a weird job. And here we are. I mean, we see it in modern day too, right? With Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. They try to get out of being royals and they're just harassed still. And it's just a tough thing. They are awarded immense privilege, but they're also trapped in this idea of fame. And I think Doran 4 can't live a normal life, even if he chooses to now.
Yeah. You're born into it or you marry into it.
Yeah.
So, John, I know that you'll probably never get around to watching The Crown, but I'm going to have you put it on your ever expanding list. It's like Kurkurmukaruk or whatever the guy in Earthsea who's got the list.
Kurukoramuk.
Thank you. Who has just endless lists of things. I feel like that's our to watch list. It just never ends.
I'm more interested now than I've been in the past. I just listened to a 5-part series on Princess Diana, a podcast series on Princess Diana. And I'm like, this is interesting. I actually, and maybe I'll watch The Crown one day.
So
I thought it was excellent.
The latter seasons, I didn't have as much interest. Once I got up into a more modern age, I sort of lost interest in it. But the very first 2 or 3 seasons are phenomenal. The acting is superb. The story construction.
And you got Matt Smith.
Mm-hmm. And it goes right into this thing of, hey, I'm just a kid and we live in a cool castle and oh shit, I'm now the titular head of this country. What does that mean? How do I deal with this? How does this affect my marriage? How does this affect the fact that I'm having a family? All of this stuff. And they really grapple with it, I think, really well in the early seasons.
And how can I possibly meet everybody's expectations?
Mm-hmm.
Because often they contradict one another.
Very good point.
In how I am going to embody this role.
Yeah.
No, I think it's an excellent series. There are historical inaccuracies. They do play around for their own purposes to some degree.
But then take it as a fictional work, right? Or as the best of that kind of fictional work.
And I would have loved to have taught a class in which I had students watch the episodes and then say, okay, go fact check these and we'll come back and talk about it.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
Now, be honest with me. Do they rightfully portray Charles's affair with Camilla when they get to the Diana stuff? Because
yes,
he got so much of a pass for how he acted. Anyway, all right.
Wrong podcast.
We're starting our next podcast here already, folks. You heard it here first.
Let's go. Let's move on. Galadriel's plea is next. Galadriel tells Elrond she's worried about Sauron's pursuit of Celebrimbor. She asks him to accompany her to Eregion, but he is hesitant after seeing Galadriel's deception under Sauron. Elrond believes all the elves are falling under his deception. So this had, I think, some of the most interesting dialogue of the whole episode. What do you all think?
Elrond is just going hard here. He was so. If you have any respect for our friendship, leave now. Like
I know, but my favorite line was he says, "Why would he not want you to go to Eregion alone?" She goes, "Because he thinks I'm still under." She says, "You know why?" And he goes, "I'm asking if you know why." That was such a great.
So good.
That was like, so good. You are in detention right now.
Yeah,
he you know what harsh. You did wrong.
He was hard. And I think part of that comes from the fact that it's breaking his heart that he has to be this way. Because this is his dearest friend.
But dude jumped off a cliff to keep rings out of the hands of his king, who gave him a direct order to give him the things.
Yeah, and yet the king accepts him back. Now, does that tell us about the quality of the king, which I think is the answer to that is good.
Right. You want to foster dissent.
If you are a good king, you do.
Yeah.
Right.
You want to hear from all opinions, not just your own or people who are going to support your own.
And this description of Sauron here is this somebody who can look inside you and pluck your notes, and the labyrinth is his. And if you're in it, you've already lost. Like all of that was just great lore work around. And if it didn't start to crystallize already for you in this season, then like go back and watch episode 1 again and just see the subtle manipulations that Halbrand, aka Sauron, is doing, because there's so many little things.
You mean season 1?
No, episode 1.
Oh, episode 1.
Like even just go back to episode 1 and you can see him manipulating Adar and, and all of the stuff. So it's just, it was such a great counterpoint note to what we're seeing with Sauron.
So here's a question for you. How does Elrond know all this?
That is a good question.
Where does he get all of this knowledge?
And where did Gil-galad get some of that lore knowledge as well? Like they both know stuff that Galadriel doesn't know about Sauron. And she's the one that's been hunting him for so long.
Yes, but Gil-galad is older than Elrond.
Right. Yeah.
No, he's older than Elrond. He is the same age as Galadriel, but the showrunners seem to be giving us a younger Galadriel.
Yeah, I don't understand that, but I kind of do understand it, right? They want to give us a reason for Galadriel to be suspicious of Sauron going forward. Suspicious of Anatar going forward, rather. But I think Elrond has always been a master of lore, right? That's been his whole thing. He is
That's a good point.
And he has been studying under Gil-galad. He studied under, he was fostered by the Sons of Feanor. I think he definitely has had a lot of exposure to the high lore in a way where I think Galadriel has been more relational, right? Galadriel spent a lot of time with Melian and a lot of time sort of honing her senses, but not necessarily her knowledge of lore. And I guess Show Galadriel has been fighting a long time, right? Not nose in a book, but instead on the field.
Right.
So they have just had different, she says, you're just a politician. Okay, but he's been in a book for this whole time, right? Like he has studied what happened and he saw firsthand the destruction of a lot of realms in the First Age.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because she's
He
out
also-
leading Elf Team 6, hunting Osama bin Sauron.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry. Did I go too far with that one?
No, very good. Very good. 5 points to your house. To mix metaphors and world entirely. In the lore, Elrond is also had some experience with Círdan at some point. I'm forgetting exactly the details of after which disaster he was associated with Círdan for a short time. And then his parents all went to do
some real business.
It was after Elrondil had already gone, and the Sons of Fëanor descended upon their group, and that was the third kinslaying. And, that was the time when Elrond was with the two oldest Sons of Fëanor, etc., etc. But Círdan does come in there at some point.
Stop kinslaying. We've had enough of it.
Seriously. But see, none of this has anything to do with Sauron. So that's why, he seems to have Sauron-specific language and knowledge. Yeah. And I'm just wondering,
It's a good question.
It's convenient for the show, obviously. But, I guess we just have to make our own headcanon.
I mean, Sauron was openly the chief lieutenant of Morgoth, right? So I think that the whole of Middle Earth would have known of him. And I don't think Galadriel was missing information that Sauron was great at deception. It's just that she didn't know that was Sauron. She didn't realize she was falling under it.
Right.
But then he calls her out for the fact that he played you because you're so single focused. The flaws that we all carry flaws. He got yours and he plucked them like a string, like strings on a
Yeah, but I also think if Elrond were really desperate for something, then Sauron would have done the same to him. I don't think this is a knowledge deficit. I think this is just Sauron is better than you. He is stronger than you. He is literally a holy being.
Which is why Elrond wants nothing to do with the rings, because the moment you even trying to reject the rings, you're playing into his hand.
Right.
The game is Sauron's, and can you get outside the game?
And this is much more potent than it is in the lore itself.
Yeah.
The idea that these rings are so closely bound with Sauron. The only reason why it was really a problem was once Sauron had forged the One Ring, which could overpower the Elven rings. Prior to that, it was a very different sense.
But I also think we haven't been explicitly told that Sauron has current influence over the rings. We've just been told that the elves are worried that might be the case.
Yes.
Which is a reasonable fear, I think, right? He told you how to make these.
At the same time, this could be the elves doing Sauron's work for him.
Right.
Well, that starts to blend into the next conversation with Círdan and about, the is beauty no less beautiful, even though the hand of the creator is,
Yeah. Well, let's go there. Yeah. So Elrond seeks the advice of Círdan, who tells Elrond that the flaws of the creator do not lessen the work, using Rumil and Daeron as examples, which I was like, wait a minute, we are doing deep pulls here. We'll talk about those in a minute.
Yeah.
He calls humility the truest form of sight and insists Elrond judge the work, not the creator. Círdan tells Elrond to consider the ways they can use the rings for good and keep them away from Sauron.
So much going on in this conversation.
Yeah.
This was my favorite scene.
Yeah.
Hands down.
These two back to back really play well with each other, play off each other well.
And wow, wasn't I thinking of cancel culture?
Yeah.
When I heard Círdan say, judge the work and leave the judgment of the one who brought it to the one who sees all things.
It's interesting, right? Because I have this thought myself sometimes. We recently had the allegations come out against Neil Gaiman, right? That he sexually assaulted some people. And I love a lot of Neil Gaiman's work.
We talked about it on Foundation with Asimov. He was very handsy, as they used to say.
Right.
And the question is, can we permit ourselves to support the work of someone who has done awful things?
And I think it's easier if they're already dead.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because then it's not financially benefiting them.
Right.
And I think that's the hook for a lot of people. it goes beyond finance. I mean, that
Do we
seems
want to
to
preserve
be,
the memory?
it seems to be a simple way to, okay, you did this terrible thing. I am going to punish you, quote unquote, by refusing to give you money. Well, guess what? Presumably, if they're so famous for their work, they've already got a fair bit of money.
Right. Fair enough.
And so how is that? Are you hurting yourself more than you're hurting the person?
Yeah, I think in some other ways it's about giving people oxygen in the conversation, right? Giving people room in the conversation. And,
Exactly. Let's just not even talk about them.
But then when we go to even a further extreme, like a Bill Cosby or O.J. Simpson, and I recognize that I'm identifying two African American men, and I don't want to talk about
Harvey Weinstein.
Harvey Weinstein. Thank you. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Richard Wagner.
Perfect. There you go.
Hundreds of years dead.
You could go on.
Of a human being. David. Anti-Semitic to the hilt.
Right.
The most beautiful operatic music I will ever hear, in all likelihood.
So, and I was just thinking with Weinstein and say Cosby, like horrible stuff, alive. And Weinstein's hard because it's tough, right? With Weinstein because he's produced so many great movies, right?
Exactly.
And Bill Cosby was a guy I grew up watching, with on cartoons, and
I know I used to watch him at 4 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. I used to watch the Cosby Show.
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, he made us laugh, and his comedy. He has some brilliant comedy. So yeah, I don't know. It's a really hard thing to separate. It's one thing if you're kind of icky, but it's another thing when you're actually assaulting people and drugging people and this kind of stuff like that. Like, I don't know. It's a really confusing. I mean, it's not confusing, but it's confusing in how we relate to their work, right? Which is what we're talking about.
But what Kyodan is saying to us is leave the judgment of the person to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if you don't believe in someone else who has wise judgment, that might be problematic. But he also says this kind of vision is called humility.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is difficult for most, but it is also the truest form of sight.
Yeah.
Now, whether you interpret this as well there, but for grace go I, or you recognize that, the lotus grows from the stinky mud.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because we want to be the judge. We want to administer punishment because it gives us a feeling of control in some fashion. Well, if you do this, then I can do that.
Mm-hmm. But you see it all the time with kids,
Absolutely.
Little kids, like you get one kid hits another kid, the other kid, what do? They hit them right back. It's almost.
But what is it doing to you yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
To hit another person and say that makes it okay. Why does
it feels
it
good?
Okay?
Yeah, it's like power. It's action.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
But I do think we've hit an interesting point here of, okay, it's very different to compare someone who is annoying to somebody who is doing hard things like a Harvey Weinstein.
A predator.
Right, a predator. That's a great word for it. And I almost feel like Kyodan is being a little unfair to Elrond here. He's saying, Daeron was insufferable. But that's not saying he's a villain. That's saying he was annoying.
Well, I think it's the first level. I think he uses it to get Elrond's attention. And he gets Elrond's attention. Clearly, Elrond had this marvelous notion of Daeron, and Kyodan said, he was a drunk. And you can see the shock.
That was Rúmil, he said, right?
Oh, sorry, Rúmil. Rúmil's the drunk. And you can see the shock, but that moment of shock is where new information can get in. Because you're suddenly realizing, okay, maybe I don't know it all.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the way he's being a little unfair is saying like, oh, well, you like these poems of this guy who had an alcohol problem. Well, that means you have to accept the works of a genocidal maniac named Sauron. You know what I mean? Like it's a little apples and oranges. I think we can have more nuance than that.
Yeah, and he goes on to have that nuance by saying, "You are wise to fear the power."
Yeah.
This power to influence so many, because domination is definitely not the basis of Eru's plan. Domination is the opposite of free will.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't let that blind you to the ways that it can be used for good. Tools can be neutral. Now, can rings that were made possibly influenced by notions of Sauron be neutral? That's something that I think that they're exploring in this series.
And my mind immediately went to, the conversation around Hiroshima and the dropping of the atomic bomb.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And we were talking about that relative to House of the Dragon and this last season where we had, using dragons are in effect a kind of nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. and using that power. And so it's a really slippery slope to can you use this tool? And there's a concept which I'm not well versed in, but I'm aware of it, which is called the tools of the master, right? I mean, do you take, with people who, enslaved people in the American history, one of the fears I think of people is like, well, if African Americans suddenly get power, they're going to do us like they did to us. But then there's an important check there, which is we can't do that because that's tools of the master. That makes us no better than who they were to us, and we have to be beyond that if we're going to live and thrive. And so, if you use power, this kind of power. Now, Círdan is an elf who's very old and very wise, and he's of a particular thing. Can he use this power? He feels like he's confident enough to hold on to this power and use it wisely. But men are corruptible, right? And I think, isn't that line even thrown out somewhere?
Celebrimbor says that
later on in the episode.
Now. Yeah. That's Audrey Lorde. The master's tools can never dismantle the master's house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where that comes.
And I think it's a really powerful concept. And I first came around to it in, what was the television show? I have to think about it again, but I'll let me Google it real quick. And
sure.
Oh, it was the Cthulhu one with. Anyway, I'll think of it.
The Lovecraft Country.
Yes, Lovecraft Country. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Lovecraft Country. That's when I sort of first became aware of that concept and that term. And I think it's I think it's an important thing to understand and think about.
Yeah.
And this final part of Círdan's conversation with Elrond, it is not your enemies who have the rings, but your most trusted friends. Don't abandon them. Open your eyes and guide them. And I think this is addressing Elrond's hurt. Yes, these are his most trusted friends. Why don't they agree with him?
Yeah.
I think that's what's eating at him as much as anything else. Yeah. How can we have such opposite views of this when we're such good friends and we agree on so many things, and all of a sudden it's harder when our dearest friends disagree with us than someone I don't even know.
Right. Like, obviously Sauron disagrees with you, and we don't have to worry about that.
No, don't waste any time on that one. But open your eyes and guide them. You have this privilege of being their friend. So who else would you want to have guiding you or, giving you these alternative suggestions and so forth than friends who you have trusted all your life?
Yeah.
I think that's what's more startling to me than anything. The switch was very hard for me, the flip. I mean, at the very end of season 1, we did see Elrond looking at Galadriel with a very hard look.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all we got. The next thing we know, Galadriel's chasing after Elrond saying, stop, stop, stop. There was some stuff in there that we might have benefited from seeing. But
I think Elrond kind of says it all in their conversation in the previous scene, which is, she goes, we made these sailors. She goes, no, you made that choice for us. By withholding information, you didn't give me the free will to make my own choice here.
Yeah, no, that is an excellent point. It may also be that Elrond is feeling guilt for his own participation because it was his mithril that made the whole thing possible.
Yeah. I do want to give the quick trivia for people before we go. Daeron this is the one I have more familiarity with. I had to look up a Rumiel, but Daeron is the elf that ratted out Beren and Luthien to Thingol. So it said, your daughter is going and cavorting with men. Well, I just think it's funny that they say, I laughed because thinking of Daeron, the elf that ratted out Baron and Luthien, that was kind of a narc about it. Calling him insufferable made me laugh. I was like, yeah, Daeron does suck.
A tattletale.
Yeah, he's a tattletale there. And Rumiel, I guess, was a lore master of Valinor who apparently wrote the Ainulindale, was the one who recorded it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So he had to
deep cuts.
to recover from the responsibility.
Yeah, these are deep cuts indeed.
Wow.
Absolutely.
He learned the secret language of the Valar, which most elves do not know.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
That is definitely huge.
But I guess was a drunkard at the same time.
Yeah, well, sometimes we see things that scare us so much we have to rely on some crutches to see us through. I'm not giving any kind of approval of alcoholism, believe me. But yeah, you can understand why it happens.
Right. All right. So the next scene is the stranger is not thriving. In Rune, the stranger collapses from dehydration. They get him water, but accidentally ring the bell of the well, attracting the trackers. They arrive, and the stranger uses he finds a stick and uses it to send everyone into a sandstorm, including the Harfoots. He tries to catch Nori, but she is swept away in the storm too, and the staff crumbles.
Along with Poppy being swept away.
Well, who cares?
Poppy cares.
But he doesn't really. He's concerned about Nori. Poppy is a straight up side character here.
I know.
I was thinking in this that clearly these two Harfoots do not have their first aid certifications, because when somebody is not bleeding or not breathing, which Nori says, you don't drag them on a mat. Yeah, you just water is going to make them breathe again. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was a little weird.
This was the one scene where I had some like, this is a little clunky. It's a little lumpy. I get it all. I get the mechanics of it all and where we're going, but. I was like, okay, moving on.
We'll put it down to sunstroke. Okay?
Yeah.
They weren't thinking clearly. I mean, the fact that they didn't react in the slightest when this big bell starts to ring. I mean, usually the Harfoots are the ones who are best able to hide from humans. But of course, they're completely out of their usual environment.
The whole point of the trackers was they was going to capture the Harfoots, hold them hostage to get the stranger. Instead, they charge right at him. They never mind the maneuvers, as the quote goes, and go right at him, which is like, wait, that's not what your plan is. And then, we're going to hide behind. I don't want to.
Maybe they underestimated his power. Who knows? I
don't know. I think the thing is that the staff disintegrates, though. I think that
was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not just the physical tool; it's also the ability to use it.
And can the tool manage the power that you're trying to channel through it as well? Because that was like a little stick to hold the rope thing.
Sure. But I think it's also a question of that's part of what you have to learn,
which is
how to conduct the power through the tool.
Agreed.
The tool,
and maybe in shaping the tool. There's maybe you have to make your staff, not just find it.
That's often part of lore from many different cultures.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Ithildin is what I've titled the next scene.
Oh, I love that so much.
Celebrimbor shows his assistant his new invention, Ithildin, an invisible metal made of mithril that becomes visible in moonlight. On that cold night, they discuss allowing Sauron inside. Celebrimbor meets Sauron outside, where he successfully convinces Celebrimbor that he was in Lindon when the ring saved the trees. He deceives Celebrimbor into thinking he's been abandoned by Gil-galad, leading Celebrimbor to take the conversation inside. He plays on the doubt, right? It's so good.
He is the evil, talented manipulator par excellence.
Right. The way he goes, I'll just be going. You don't need me here. He knew as soon as he could speak to Celebrimbor, that was the way.
That was it.
Which is why Galadriel didn't say, don't let him in. She said, don't even treat with him.
Treat with him.
Because she knew he would be able to deceive Celebrimbor, or if there was at least a risk of it.
Standing outside playing Peter Gabriel works.
Just that one line. Isn't this always the way with us creators? Making it you and me, bro.
Right. So is this mithril Ithildin, is this to speak friend and enter?
It absolutely is.
I just wanted to make sure I was correct on that.
Which is why it gives me hope for the Doors of Durin, especially now that Narvi is on the scene. So,
got it.
Fingers crossed.
It is that, and also in the Shadow of Mordor video games, which I loved, which are very lore not accurate. You could find little filled-in pieces, random places with your shadow sense, and you could claim them, and it was great. It was great.
Okay.
Did anybody else like the elven umbrella that they brought out?
I thought it was brilliant because it's modeled after a plant.
Oh, yeah.
Or at least that's what it made me think of. The Jack in the Pulpits?
Nope.
It's a wonderful woodland plant. It's rare now. It's a protected species, but you see it in New England forests where there's a lot of good undergrowth. There's a stamen-like piece in the middle. They call him Johnny Jump Up sometime. And then a leaf comes up and over.
Oh, yeah, sure. I've seen these. Yeah.
I thought you would.
Yeah.
So let's bring in the rest of the conversation so we can talk fully about Annatar.
Definitely.
Annatar.
Celebrimbor is thrilled to hear Sauron's tale that his rings were a success. He feels he has finally succeeded as a creator and opens a first-stage bottle of wine.
Sauron, anyway.
Yeah. Sauron implies he is an emissary of the Valar, but Celebrimbor is hesitant to believe it. Sauron dims the lights, relights the forge, and takes the elvish form of Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. His goal is to get Celebrimbor to forge rings for the other peoples of Middle-earth. I like that we have a mission now, right? This is now our guiding path for Sauron this season.
Did you catch that the forge even is in the shape of an eye? They've been playing with the eye motif a lot with the lava and the forge. Yeah. So they're being tricksy. The showrunners are being tricksy with the cinematography.
Yes.
Which is good, right? We want them to do that.
As long as they don't overdo it, yes.
Right. It's got to be, right. It's a fine line, right? We know when it's like certain things, we know what it is when we see it. And when it's off, we know it's off. I thought it was interesting that Sauron went out as a blast of ice, and in this one he comes back in a blast of fire. So I was like, oh wait, a little Song of Ice and Fire action going here,
Well, of course, ice and fire are supposedly two of the most intense elements, so that would make sense.
I love this new look for Sauron. I love the Annatar look. It's exactly what I wanted out of Sauron in the Second Age, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that one image of him as he's floating with godlit clouds behind him in his robe.
Yeah, man.
Gently blowing the breeze. Classic Jesus image.
Completely.
Jesus and also Mary.
I've seen that painting, that oil in the basement of my grandparents' church. Yeah,
exactly.
Totally.
Exactly. The showrunners were definitely drawing on their religious imagery backgrounds there with that.
But Tolkien wasn't really into religion, was he?
Interesting question, John.
I'm just kidding. So I mean, I love this, and I think Charlie Vickers does a really great job changing his vocal tone to be a lot more like, "Hello, I am Annatar, the Lord of Gifts." He's no longer the gruff Halbrand. I think really doing a great job here. I'm so glad with this casting.
Yeah, I think it's
superb.
Been doing really well.
My only question, I wonder why Celebrimbor didn't sense it when they put the rings on.
Celebrimbor didn't sense it?
He was the crafter. He was the maker of them.
And he wouldn't sense the vibrations that they're activating.
I don't know. I mean, why did he not have one himself? I mean, it
sounds like Elrond
scarfed them all, I know. But in their initial creation, it was Elrond and Galadriel and Celebrimbor.
Yeah.
So
right.
It just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that there was any lore elements that would have supported that interpretation, but it just occurred to me to wonder, why is he so completely cut off? I mean, there's Osanwe, and we've talked about, does distance interfere with that? But surely there would have been other messengers who would have come to Eregion saying, yes, the tree, we don't have to leave Middle Earth. Isn't it wonderful?
Right.
It's a good question.
I just love I'm going to open a first age bottle.
Yeah, he called it first age.
Wonderful. wonderful. And then he never drinks it because he gets knocked on the floor when Anatar appears. I mean, you could definitely
sub out some like romantic music for when Anatar comes and the look that Celebrimbor gives him.
Oh Lord. Don't get me started.
Question, with Anatar, Sauron, whatever, wasn't there a time when Sauron was on Numenor and he appeared to the Numenorians in a different form? I'm trying to remember.
In the lore that happened after the rings were forged.
Right. Oh, that's what it is. Okay, I had it backwards. Yeah. I had it backwards in my head. Yeah. He's on Numenor.
It is a weird order. I would assume it was the opposite order as well, because you would think he'd want to be in Numenor second, but in the writings, he did go to the elves first.
Got it. Okay, cool.
And I'm still wondering when the dwarf rings are going to
get made.
Show their creation.
Well, we saw in the trailers, right?
Oh yeah, in the trailer, it's clear that it's going to happen.
Right.
We'll have to wait.
Actually, I have an idea, but I won't spoil it.
There was one other thing that caught me in this, which is the whole sub-creator conversation. And that, this whole idea of creating these rings and creating these powerful forces. And when Celebrimbor is like, he's like, Halbrand is asking about, are you crying? And he's like, no. He's like, you don't know the joy that I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
And then it just made me think of that whole sub-creator stuff that was going on, with Tolkien. But then I looped back and I was like, has Sauron created, or is he just manipulated? And isn't that a thing with Tolkien, which is evil can't create; it can only bend and malform things that have already been created?
Great catch.
Yeah. So there was that subtle playing going on where Sauron's watching, or Halbrand is watching him. And I couldn't tell what Vickers was giving us. Was he giving us jealousy? Was he giving us, but I do know, or I don't know, or it was just great. It was really well played.
If he was giving us anything, it was,
I've got you. That too mixed in as well. Are you my friend? And I loved that too.
Oh gosh, that line.
It's like you have to invite a vampire, part of vampire lore. You have to invite them in.
You have to invite them in the house.
Right? He's like, are you my friend? It's like, okay, so now we're bonded. Now I've even got you even more.
And he's kind of sparkly, like in Twilight.
And I have a feeling it's only going to get more intense. We'll see.
Yep.
So this is all really great stuff. I think really great setup for the rest of the season. We have one last scene, a new power dynamic where Gil-galad gives Galadriel orders to go to Eregion, but makes clear that Elrond is her new boss. Meanwhile, Durin IV is invited to Eregion by Celebrimbor.
Yeah.
So messages aren't getting in, but messages got out.
Well, because Sauron wants that message to get out.
Exactly. Yeah. Which I just think, I'm just pointing back to Marilyn's earlier question.
Yeah.
Is how is he throttling the communications to Eregion?
Yeah.
Right. What forces does he have outside of Eregion? When did that get set up? How did it get set up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe he didn't go right to Eregion.
Mm-hmm. Took some Uruks.
Well, and again, this is sort of a question throughout about, because Maiar, what are his limits?
Mm-hmm.
He is subjecting himself to some pretty serious limits.
Right.
But he has a purpose in mind when he does that.
Yeah. He can do a lot more than we see on screen.
Yes, and I'm not sure that he has any kind of control or influence over Uruks at this point, because they are all committed to a god.
Mm-hmm.
And are scared at the thought that Sauron, the necromancer, might actually have come back.
Yeah.
So who else does Sauron have to pick on for bully boys,
Well, we know Sauron's very good at recruiting men.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
And interesting that it's Celebrimbor who talks about men being easily corrupted.
Yeah.
When this topic of rings for men comes up.
Sauron's like, you don't say. Men are easily corrupted.
Imagine what a new thought. I'll have to ponder this for a while.
I'll be in my study for a while.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a lovely episode. We did it in under 2 hours this time. It was exciting.
Hey.
Yes. Shall we just talk quickly about programming notes? By the way, before we do that, send in feedback to lotr@thelorehounds.com. Nancy will be on the other end. So
yay, Nancy.
Please send her a nice email if you want to do feedback. I think we're going to limit feedback to just emails and voicemails this season because we're doing the extra Lorecast. So make sure you post in an email or the contact form or voicemail if you want your feedback read on the podcast. Alicia just told me what she's doing this week. I'm trying to make sure that I have it correct. She is doing a podcast with Marilyn. Marilyn, you want to talk about that quick?
Yes, it was the second half of a series on the myths and legends from Star Wars.
I think part 1 is coming out this week.
Oh, it's part 1 coming out this week? Okay, so
saying.
that's part 1 of that is coming out, and there is a part 2 that we just recently recorded, so that's
great.
Why that was uppermost in my mind. But yeah, we had a lot of fun. Imagine that, putting Alicia and I together, and we get to talk about myths and legends and witches, and wow.
And she's also doing her Wool Shift Dust book club with the first part of the 3rd book of the Wool Shift Dust series, and that is the Silo series, Dust Part 1. So that'll be a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have, I think next week, Aaron's going to be back with more Radioactive Ramblings, but not right now. So I'll keep you all posted on that next week. For us, David, can you talk a little bit about Alien?
We are going to have a movie reaction, Alien Romulus movie reaction podcast to go along with our 2 previous podcasts that we did on the 1979 movie. One with a couple of academics, and then one where Aisha and Alicia and I get together and talk about 79. So, but we should have a reaction. We don't have it scheduled yet, but we're gathering or marshaling our forces.
Yeah, very cool. And I know Alicia, Brandon, and I are going to be doing a Beetlejuice.
Oh, fun.
in a couple of weeks. So that'll be a lot of fun too.
Cool.
And Marilyn and I also recorded a podcast on Silmarillion stories of Maeglin that we will be releasing this month as well. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that took a really interesting turn, didn't it?
I thought that was a very unique conversation about Tolkien. Like I've never actually considered that topic in Tolkien before. We did talk about, trigger warning for that podcast, sexual assault within Tolkien because it's relevant to that chapter.
Oh yeah.
Okay. One other thing is for subscribers, V for Vendetta on 11Zs.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, so
good work. You want to do our quick shout outs?
Sure. Hit me with some music.
Very nice.
I don't know. Should I put on a pair of wingtips and get a fedora? Discord server boosters: Gnarls, Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Dork of the Ninjas, Duve71, Captain Gingy 56, Athena Agilea, Adrienne, Tina, and Lestu. Thank you all so very much for boosting our server and giving us a better platform for which we can commune with our listeners and our community. To our lore masters, our top tier monthly subscribers and annual subscribers, thank you all so very much for your support. We could not do it without you. Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, David W, Brian P, SC, Peter OH, Bettina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M, DJ Miwa, Andra B, Guang Yu, Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex V, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Dally V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Stuart B, Jeffrey B, Elisa U, and forever last but never least, Adrian. Thank you all so very much. We couldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without all of you who are listening, no matter whether you subscribe or you don't. We're just glad that you're here and part of our community. So
you're great guys and gals, old sports.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. 2 more podcasts to go for this.
We're recording the Lorecast right after this. So
exactly.
See you all on the 3rd episode. The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by the Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.